tällä on stora ero nieko min gjort ja gått ei se valdia stora servoda gjortit att det går etna med pirra ja niin att det går lyfti etna ma että tarajit tuu ja etna mi kaskana heillä nu karrasa nu att det niinku det går du mattarat ja du maadarat visu vaadsanda isemme etnaminalde ja det Sámi det går puores tolos muittelusaimilde det handlar väl nu att maadarat uonjat det går ein orro luntun det går vaarin ja erinomaisesti tai passipaikin.
When I think about healing and transformation, just transforming as human beings, it's a journey. It's a journey to be able to, first of all, tell your truth about maybe what happened to you, what happened to your people.
Millä hainaan ahte historias ja vielä on päivät tähpähuve ollut ässihma vaikutti Sámiitta ja namalassi negatiivalatsa ja sämentikki ja tietuske ollessamme servodahla fikkan parkahta nouti ja ahte tilli puoranifche, mutta tällä kehtsojuvon ahte mihkiä iera idälsa nuo vähkehahtemia tarppasa täkkärprosessa maanpokte tästä saattaisemmet chielkadihtan tiili ja tästä kaunahtakkär tuimaiman ja manjami sihkarasti hahte pahtevuotas Sámi voika voida olla suvehedakkär vielä hämme isah tähpähuvasi ahte tahlatat vuolkasatti ollestaan prosessi ja tietuske tahla hirmahtehalla sahte ollesäikke sihkarasti tanahte ahte puoho assepielit sametikki ja nartalatsai siitä tjähkin ja suomas tahta mahla asahtan tämän prosessatella tjatnasan tasahte tahmiitan prosessas chuovvu makkertuimmai komissuna eftohade taht tolvajuvoi tuota i optoskuului tahte tahla herkesprosessa tätä huivilta tanahte tas sähtämaittai lokte takkär touttui ja muihtui paajasmai iljakänske opa häälitanke muihtasit outalta he iljakäälitan muihtali outalahte ahte tahla hirmatte hallasahte tastomi adjuhmaittaitan viehkitalle ko mian tarppasi ahte nuahte ta trauma loktani holtasi paajas ja tästä mihke ei tähpähuva mutta ahte mi maittai adjuhtan tan psykososiaalalla tarjaa takkärtiilis ja peassa halmalla kai kietahallattan tai äshi.
Millä vähän tuo purriväitsit, että mihän mai kultalle tai olomoi muistelusai. Ja tää parka hoftaas olomuijon ja servodaan, että olmos teo peassa monu laktää, naoda lakti tai tähpäät. Ihan ne takkamehtuu mentiin tähpäätusei, mutta naoda lakti tämän tähpäätusei, det on etsas historiai. Mikalksemmet naodet ornetta kär, hui velleä sjalmada kär, mannu tilallas voida koossa päätet, että kooslade on sähtää lähettetään pirrat hallojuvo monu tienlahkai kiahpase että lyhtsede on älkki päätet tokko että itäpstan palla että muun talkartan taas monu että sähtää päätä maittaa vähän teo kultalle ja mun toivon että kun ei saastalla mi jo orne että pohte tokko kiefkaniita ja tokko kosta holmo liette o kaskaneas että torvolas piiraasi ja toppe o monu tokko maittaa dan addiumia että tällä aipa ok, että hallatte on minkku.
My role within the TRHT framework is one of the hosts of the gathering, and really as the director of the Alaska Native Policy Center, was the coordinator and the person who provided the space and all of the tools necessary to ensure that we held a gathering that was lifting up our people and keeping them in the safest way that we could to work towards healing. The framework itself, number one, was driven by our people. We wanted to make sure and ensure that we were rooted in how our people wanted a process moving forward. A lot of communities throughout the world are using truth reconciliation commissions to do the work that we are doing. But First Alaskans through this process realized really quickly that reconciliation was a term that denotes that you are trying to come back together and build a relationship and reconstitute a relationship. But in our opinion, we've never had a relationship with the federal and state government, so there's nothing to go back to, and nothing that we would want to go back to. So we chose a different route. We didn't want the federal or state government leading our process. We wanted the process to be led by our people, for our people, to ensure that we were doing our due diligence to have the best care for our community. And so rooting this process and not allowing the federal or state government to lead the process was really, really important to us.
Our ancestors and our Native people, we didn't go by a Western clock. We went by seasons, and when we sat together, we weren't busy looking at our electronics. We weren't busy looking at the time. We were genuinely giving space and time to each other and listening to one another's hearts. And so during the tribunal process, that's what we did, is we allowed people to just speak from the heart with no pressure, no time pressure, no expectations, no questioning, and speaking until almost like their soul is fulfilled from being heard. While I'm a Western psychologist, I'm also trained in working with Alaska Native elders who have taken me under their wing to mentor me about the history of our people, so that I can blend two worlds and bring healing.
Ja tällä ollut saapmelat kyllä saakasta nuot, eli se tehalla se odzu tai roktut saapmai. Ja tällä tego oassin tego processan tego na saada ollisin vas almukin. Mutta ja tähän tehalla siirryskin, kun mä olen tahkan huijolu. Mä olen tutsun huijolu kovadasait ja mä olen tutkan kovadasait. Ja mä olen jälleen kirji tai pirranai. No, että tähän on alle käy vaimo assi mun. Jos minkä on ofto väl, millä ofto musean. Mä oon pirra hikikkille tiehtää meikki. Tähän on teko vastin semme prosessa mi orrasi alkaa. No, tämä liitsi olu en, että teko talko teemme, jos nuuka alkaa lohkaa taas. Että min orrasi alki tudsukaarit ja orrasi keivaiskohti teitä. Että niin kuin täällä teko millä valdan tai roktut oftoladsen. Ja teko millä hiedsaa valdan faamu roktut. Kun perä vuodet ja että Suomessa alkaa addi joita min siitä. Että minkä alkaa vaadsu joita. Ei se ole aldin vai museain.
You know, trying to get people together is always the hardest part of anything that we're doing, that they're doing, is getting people there and willing to talk. You know, that it's it's just I think it's just a great deal that they brought to the table for everybody concerned. It's not easy, to share. And I applaud the people that attend these things, because it's very important that we do bring out things that are holding our people back and finding a solution to it. The one I participated the most in was laws and land, because that is what I'm passionate about. I want to move everybody into getting their hunting and fishing rights back.
Mun hälitivchen ahte säämelatchat puhka nuo saattasetti tuolai väsihti hahte täht prosessalla min oktasas prosessa ja ahte misli lohpi käipitit tämän prosessas ollu misla lohpi käipiti hahteta huksejuvo min volkkasais ja takkarvuin millä mitita heivolas ja vuos ja maittei torvolas ja kalmuun muumelas misli lohpi käipiti maittai tai lohpapohtosi ja tätä tuon lahtusse prosessa millä tulla kai pavchahta mutta tällä prosessa missä mitita vuori.
Our research institutions, churches, religious organizations, nonprofits, resource extractors, all of the above were invited to be accountability partners, our leadership in state and federal government. And they were not allowed to participate in our tribunal unless they A, agreed that their institution held a legacy of harm towards our community, B, that they were willing to do something about it to ensure that that legacy of harm was addressed and that moving forward that it didn't continue to perpetuate, and 3, they had to take a training ahead of the tribunal process. So the framework for each tribunal ended up being, and it's still an adaptation, like it's never going to be the same. Each tribunal is going to be different. We had our healers at each gathering. Our healers were every aspect of healing that we could identify. They ranged from psychological, what are they called? Certified counselors and psychologists, to our traditional healers, to spiritual healers, to people in our community who would never consider themselves a healer, but they show up. If someone is being harmed in our community, if someone's hurting in our community, they're the people who show up. And then the final role that we held was our story guardians. Our story guardians were people who we identified in our community who could be present for the entire tribunal. Folks we know who are really good at listening deeply, and also really good at helping to reflect back in a way that is meaningful the stories and the truths that they were hearing. Some of our tribunals went for 12 hours, and so we needed to know that our story guardians were going to be able to spend the whole 12 hours listening to solid testimony. There's 23 distinct different linguistic groups in Alaska. Each of our communities has different value systems, different protocols, different ways of processing, different governance structures, and so we were pulling from all of the different components of our various cultural groups and infusing them into this process so that it would be guided by how we would traditionally do things, but obviously in a contemporary way to move them forward.
Ja tietysti outomerkkatihtätä tuottavuutta ja suovataan prosessilla takkärmastuon ajan huitehalatsan tanahte millä päässään tämän valmastallamis, mutta vahte päässä maittai pahte voitais kulla ja vaini hahte makkar prosessa toppe erä iemialmoi kaskavuotas liahte sähtikko mi Sámi hahpa toppe joita ja leofas mistasto tämän prosessas minju takkärmaan misähtit faalla tohko erä iemialmoi äyhkiin.
Mä saakastin oftan Pores saappanat sain tapirra. Ja så muisteli mun, että niinku, kun se oli nuorra, se juuri, että mä olen 40% saappanassa. Nu se logoi mun, että nu mä juuri nuorran. Että niinku mä mahtan saamikielä ja mä olen sen patsutoulun. Ja mun jätä leiteko olles kulttuuranu. Mutta kun se oli porastuvun, se oli aina, että tällä on ollut en kulttuura, kun sististä ollaan ollut en, kun per patsutoulu ja kielä. Että tähän on saami wahkina ja teko noista, että luontuu, jos kalkaa lohka luontu osko vai luontu filosofia. Me ei saa logoja, että se on vailea. Se oli vailhiskohtan tai juurtamalle ja luontufilosofia puolespelle. No se logoja, että me verratte valdi saami roktota, että saami uogie.
I think the main thing is, criminalizing us for being who we are as indigenous people with the land. I mean, this land was all our land before, contact. And we've always been good stewards of our lands and waters and air and everything around us. As time went on, people started realizing we are a unique culture. Unfortunately, we don't have any really fluent Tlingit speakers, and we're missing that in our school, but we're trying to find some way to get that remedied.
Pohka he joutomerkka tihte hälit. Opa käipitihke vaikkapa sämekellä palvelusaitan tihte ahte palle, ahte jos mun te muistalan, ahte mulla on sämmeläs ja mun hälitifchen kievahtihtaan sämekielä te ahte taas chuombu joita negatiivalas, ahte ta huinua maittaa takkar arkapäi tää siis takkar väives ässi ja takkar paktsasa mahla historias pohtan tai hekeävän.
It's funny because when I think about my own journey, I'm my late mother is Aleut. She's Unanga originally from St. Paul Island, and my late father is Chamorro from the island of Guam. I was removed from my mom when I was probably about 5 or 6 years old for about 7 years, zero contact. She ended up dying of alcoholism, and so her layers of trauma were complex, but I didn't understand it. And I was about 14 when I made it back to St. Paul Island. I think back, I'm 47 today, I think back on how emotional I was and how difficult it was to contain my emotion. And I didn't know even how to put words to what I felt. And I began to study psychology. And I think a lot of my therapy came from studying human behavior and understanding human behavior. But one day at the university, there was a sign on the wall that said, the Aleut story, the untold story. I walked in and I sat down and the film started, and lo and behold, there was my grandpa testifying to the federal government in Aleut about what happened to our people. But I think that was a turning point in my life because that film was made to tell the truth of our people. And when I think about the history of residential boarding schools and children being taken from their parents and children being without a parent, our parents, good or bad, our parents are supposed to bring us comfort. And You know, there were so many nights as a child away from my mother that I would just cry myself to sleep. I wasn't protected. I wasn't safe. And unfortunately, you know, I was abused. Physically, mentally. I was told I was ugly. I was told I was fat. I was told a lot of really horrible things. And I was told that my mother didn't love me. I wasn't told that I was loved.
Ethän väsähtusajan tahat outamerkittiin muu vanhemmat kuktohlava vädsän tämän asalaskuvla ja esholtstön muu vanhemmat ei tiedä, että mun lyhtsän kuullan käsiä hallan oluus maitietä i skuvla äikki. Te on aivan oppa lyhtsien vädsän skuvla. Että skuvla lämmösen takia oftalla mielestä te on tabu. Että käännettä muisti just entälle ei asota häikki tähpättusään tällä tähpättuva määnäitä. Tuota ei unna tsetjahkensas männää ja kähtsää pirrases ja me aina muuttuu tsetjahkensas määnää. Ja verte alo juurtasetan ädtijuumi. Aina teoske maittaa tannahteta pelaa min kovluus monu erinomas oluuta kär. Vättes väives ässi tähpäätusa malla no oluus olomoin teota kär traumaattalais tähpäätusa mä horro että tällä nuo aipa mierits olu että mä sitten jokke taaluus jos älkääs mehtalla minnu ja tuon ja tahatte muuta hässi lakta se tasamai säämälätsellä teo oftaas väsiittänä. Täällä millä pekka olu hallana, että verte halla tai traumai pirra. Mutta takki iljät to estouta, että ei solla väsiittämä ja traumaattalas, että mi verte halla tai teo väsähtusai ja traumai pirra. Että liätteo tällä haddaa saajia, että kinnuukin häälitä pere muistalle mo solla eallan ja näillä eallan te haddaa tämän saajia maittaa tasa, että liät olomokki, että ei tarpastaan. Jolla aipa perrevää säätussa ja taferte tanke ädde ja topstet, mutta mun mielestä niehan millä eallan jo tämän rajai. Teo mihki ei lyhtsä tähpäattuvan, että tällä maittai tieppiälli, että täällä mikalka kultalle tai hiajumusai, jolla liet väives väsähtusakia ankilla etas, että sikitä adti veiolas vuotta adju viehkiä.
I want all of our children to not question what has happened to lead to the fact that we don't speak our language. We've lost so much of our culture. It's been put to sleep, forcefully put to sleep by hands that were not our own. And I want them to know why. They deserve to know why. They deserve to know what had taken place that has created the moments that we're in now. And in doing so, helping to them to process what it could look like moving forward. What it did look like prior to the forced assimilation and colonization of our people. They severed our language, they severed our artwork, our dancing, our song, our familial, our family ways of raising our children. They severed every aspect of our ways of who we are except for our hunting, fishing, and gathering practices. Was the one thing that our community never lost. Each community has its own story of losing land, of land being forcefully taken, of land being tricked out of the hands of our native people, whether they be allotment lands or lands that the village corporation held, so on and so forth. The boarding and residential school was a big one for us. That was definitely something that we were really nervous to do. Because our elders are still living through what it meant to be severed from who they were. The boarding and residential school era in this country was one of the most harmful acts of assimilation and colonization that many are still living with the consequences of that historical harm today. And so our children being raised in an environment where all they were taught was hate and how to hate themselves and hate their fellow man and hate who they were as Indigenous people, then came home as adults and had children of their own. But they weren't raised with love. They weren't raised loving who they were and loving their people and loving their culture. They were raised and being taught that was all bad. And so they had children. And in raising their own children, perpetuated that because they didn't want their children. You never want your children to experience any form of harm. You always want them to have better than you had. And so in order to protect them, raising them the way that they were taught, but also not knowing how to love, like how to express love, how to show love, how to hug. If you've never experienced a hug that was anything more than just absolute love for you, how do you demonstrate how to hug your child in a meaningful way? And so that just perpetuates, right? It just bleeds into from one generation to the next.
Yeah, how does healing happen? That's such a good question because I really believe that healing takes place in relationship. As a psychologist, people come to us, and often when they come to us, people want to help themselves, but people look to others to help themselves. And so I really believe healing comes with building relationship with others. It's really important to have healers present during the process because we just don't know how we're going to react when we're talking about difficult conversation. And so when we talk about the past, there's a lot of shame and guilt around things that have plagued our people, whether it be sexual abuse that occurred or addiction to drugs and alcohol. Those are all things that people don't, we don't go to those things thinking that they're good for us. It is a part of this trauma, this history of trauma and what happened to our people. So when we talk about the past, we usually avoid it because it creates shame and guilt.
To heal, you have to be uncomfortable. There's no way around it, So that's the first step, is bringing it up. And it makes people uncomfortable, then it's doing its job, because that's what we need to start being, bringing it out of the dark into the light.
Käsketä vähkehtämaita ei oftaskas olmu ja tela päässään viimakki kietahtalla takarashii mai käske iljakkaisi outal häälitanta hesähtään kietahallat.
The healing is interwoven through the entire process. So it's all with the aim of healing, right? We don't call it truth and reconciliation. We call it truth, racial healing, and transformation. And so just by speaking our truths is a healing process into itself. Most of our people have never had the opportunity to speak these truths. Most have never had the validation of those who have harmed them listen to their truth, hear their truth, and accept it as truth in all spaces.
Tähän, että missä säämällätseitä välttäkään mielenterveysvuoda palvelusat, välja själma mielenterveysvuoda palvelusa faalus, te tällä jo oktatakään storra vaihtuu, tai niin kuin tuodaan ja tarpeeksi. Tässä on isoras olu takkään väsähtuussa. Ja tämä mun velpoatan tässä tänne historiallista traumaa ja tämä on mit ärpet. Tämä komissionahan ei alla tämän komissiona äike, mutta tämä prosessa olla velkään johtui. Tähän innoa tässä, kun tämä komissiona parkuun ohka. Että tähän on jatkasuva. Ja tällä hirma tehdä, että jätkii, että tälle me ei tuoda mun jahkana, että tällä hui oluta siskältäs kielä tällainen. Ja tässä me ei tarpeeksi, tai voi.
No kun saakka muu parkkopirra, hänelle mahtsahit koodassa, hänelle akta tekkä laukki, me saattaa valtit. Ja det går att min galga det går oftus valti roktu mahto tai pirra ja det går att min mahtit arbevieru ja min mahtit det går att min ipmidit det går sistolu taas meitä merkkaa sanu ja kohtele saad nun luonto ja Sámi kulttuuria noin godalleekar almulas mahtun miedego le taapalas saapnatsai kaskan. Te minä valtan alle kuhkislaukki tekar olli suhti vai tekar rokkitumuutin lagan olles kulttuuri.
Jos Sámi servata häälitä ja tasalla tarpute tietuske mikalkkasemmet maittaismehtohtakkär maittai tai min ärpevirolas puoritan vui.
No jos mehtää tänne, että mä oon ärpevirolla Sámi on puridäjillä toimante. Tällä mä jäkkää rokta ässi, mä ei perte huahpat.
Täällä me ei moi juttuna, että täällä tehalemus. Me ei min edsaa tahkat. Ja että min edsaa, että kun valti faamu roktut, sammasladze. Että jos min kalkaa aalu, teko perä aanu ei joitain, pitää kege kierä ja vuoriti vantsu joitain. Te sahta saada vuoriti valla kuhka. No että tämä prosessa, millä ei se valti kun ja startai, kun hänelle oassin tämä prosessan. Mutta storimus oassi mä gjort hänelle teko damme min edsa mahti tahkat. Ja teko bare gjort att okej, min verti edsa tsegget sihke kulttuuria ja damme min mahtit. Ja det mig starta att det hopp mig vai ei hopp mä tälle vähän det min kontroll alkopelta. Muhti muutui. Mutta det tiedoske jos vaadittu sin det går toftustit att min kaunut ja att mis leuoika vuorat etnamitta. Jos sin toftustit taan ja minä adsutaan paapurana, det handlar det gotekar. Tälle laukki jolka kuului.
In order to move forward, I think is that we're going to have to be more assertive on what we need to do. That's we can't sit back and accept what we have to keep moving forward. Being able to, like my brother Mike said, hold their hand, take them there, and hopefully they'll go from there. We can't force anybody, but we can help them along. And that's my dream for what I'm trying to accomplish here.
Tänhän mi varra aini tasavamis muhtuun päivä. Kalmun jahkana tätä hokta hui tehalas ässinua takkär tiervaas servotaas ja takkär servotaas. Mi pirke te lietakkär naana iestoutu ja takkär ahte servotas sähtälaht räämiis. puhtas miitan servotahkii kulle. Ja mun saavanahte tämän prosessa kiechilmi namalassi piesaseimet nannehtan, mitä kär almohlas iestoltu.
Tällä takkär meillä räämeistan echas historias ja echas kulttuuras ja tuonne ja tän itapsteo chiade ja tuonne sähtää äälle teo sämmeladjan. Tällä varra takkär okta. Tällä takkär almo kos olmo hei kote echas sorme echas ja kos olmos nauda vuestena tahtu viehki ja maittai adju viehki.
You know, what I would hope for people after the process is continuing to have hope and continuing to heal themselves. Because again, it's a journey. I see our people having a better understanding of one another, of our communities, of the pain that we observe. And I see our people learning how to hold each other up instead of pull each other down, and learning how to find the words to describe what we feel, which helps us to heal.